Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Love Baxter Podcast. I'm Adam Greenbaum, the founder of Love Baxter. I built this in honor of my dog Baxter, who passed away in October of 2024. Suddenly, I was hurt and broken, and I could not find any resources on the internet for anything related to his death or how I was feeling. So I built the world's largest end of life platform at lovebaxter.com. Hope you'll check it out and follow us on social media. Today, I have Dr. Liz Fernandez. She is the founder of Paws. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, I appreciate you being here. And, today we're talking about something that I deal with a lot. We lost Baxter, who was 12 and a half in October of last year. And I have a 15-year-old Boston Terrier. In fact, at 15, you celebrate milestones. So she turned 15 in April and it's August. So, she's still going strong. Anticipatory grief. It's something that I think affects a lot of people, especially a lot of pet owners. And you're the perfect person to talk about it. But before we jump in, I'd love for everyone to know about you and Wisdom Paws and everything you do.
Sure. Well, let me just start by saying that I too have been going through this. I just euthanized my own kitty, who is 16 and 4 months, about a week and a half ago, about 10 days ago.
No, I did not know. I'm
And
sorry.
the last 4 months I knew she wasn't well, but I knew she didn't want me to do a lot of things to her. So each day was just, you know, what do I do to make you happy? What does your day want to look like? How can I support you? And I totally get there's no way around it. I think it would be probably untrue to say that somebody doesn't experience anticipatory grief. I mean, unless you're just totally clueless about death in general, at some level, we're anticipating our or one of our loved ones' demise at some point. And as they get older, 15, 16, for a pet, that's definitely, on our minds. And one of the things that's kind of why I created Wisdom Paws in the first place, is I was doing a lot of end of life care. I have a house call acupuncture practice. And so most of my patients are geriatric. And most of those now, as they become more geriatric, then it's my responsibility to help them, move to the next plane and let go of their bodies. And so I talk to people, and since I have a house call practice, I have lots of time. Each treatment is about 45 minutes to an hour, and a lot of that time is spent with just needles in the pet. So we're just sitting and talking, and so we have a lot of time to talk about this sort of thing. And what I discovered over the last 20 years of doing this is that people have such a fear around death, and they don't, so many things are unknown. It's that fear that creates even more anticipatory grief, because they have so many questions that they don't know how to answer. And not that I have the answers. What I try and do is help people understand that we don't know the answers. And so, how do we meet that? How do we meet that unknown? We all had a good dose of that in 2020 when COVID hit. It's like,
Yeah.
we thought we knew what each day was going to look like, from day to day to day and month to month. And all of a sudden that went out the window. And, all of a sudden we're in this unknownness of what is happening, what's going to happen tomorrow. And the reality is that we live in that all the time. We just paint the picture and the story that everything is fine and we know what's going on and we're in control. And so how do we pivot? How do we navigate that? And what I try and help people with is just recognizing that death is happening all the time. Um,
It's interesting too. Baxter wasn't the first pet I lost. But you have pets and then you have he was my son.
yeah,
So let's just say it
children.
like that.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
and, he was my, I always joke. And by the way, this is for all of my animals. But when I looked at Baxter, I didn't see a dog. I saw a little boy. Like I saw my guy. I saw
yeah,
my best friend.
yeah, yeah,
But he wasn't the first pet I lost. Now, for me, what makes this unique for me is I don't have a relationship with my parents. I don't have a relationship with grandparents. I moved out of the house young. So, I didn't live through this world where I watched grandparents age and pass away. I haven't had it, I didn't watch my parents age. So, I have my in-laws who are like parents to me that I love. But, with Sophie, my 15-year-old dog, it is hard because, like the running joke at home between my wife and I is if Sophie wakes up, goes outside, goes potty, eats breakfast, and has a good morning, I have the best day ever. No matter what happens, I have a good day. And we're right now at 15 and a quarter, whatever she is, we're at the point where 6 out of 7 days a week, she wakes up, she goes potty, she comes up, she eats, she takes her medicine, she has a good day. Now the other one day, it's not she doesn't eat, she's not doing well. It's she couldn't go potty, she didn't really feel like breakfast, she'll have a late breakfast, and those are the days I get stressed. And it just affects me, even though I know that yesterday was good and tomorrow will be good. But I think a lot of pet parents really deal with anticipatory grief, even if you don't realize it. So I'll tell you all on Love Baxter, we have thousands of pages. We have thousands of searches coming in since we launched in July. And we have all this information. And over a 2-week period, the first 2 weeks, the number one search term was anticipatory grief. It totally blew
Yeah.
my mind.
Yeah.
That is what people are searching for. Now, a lot of people don't know me yet because we just launched, but I ran a company called Whisker Cloud, which merged with Pet Desk. So we had 13,000 veterinary clinics as customers. And really think about that. I know every veterinarian on earth. I don't think our vets understand the stress we have when we have a senior pet at home. And now you probably have a better idea of it because you're in the home with them. You have time to sit and talk. But I think when you go to a clinic and they check you in and they got 15 minutes, you don't understand that we're really stressed about this animal, and we're really stressed if we're waiting on a diagnosis and you take an extra 2 or 3 days to get back to us.
Yeah, and I did emergency and general practice for 25 years before I started doing this. So I've been through that, and I do know it's hard. And that's one of the things I love about what I can do now is that I do have those relationships and those deeper relationships, and it is a struggle for people to um, deal with their veterinarians, who some of them are amazing and some stories are great, and then other stories that I hear are very stressful and distressful. But I will say that as veterinarians, I'm on a couple of the Facebook groups for veterinarians, and when we are going through this, we are no different than you are, and we have our soul dogs and our soul pets, and we struggle the same way that you do. And so that's where I think that I don't know why some veterinarians separate that out, and 'cause they don't seem to honor it as much in their clients sometimes, or their pet parents, as what I see just in for what's happening with them. So I think a lot of that is just time. But the idea of the anticipatory grief, I think that also veterinarians have an anticipatory fear of their clients' anticipatory grief. We don't know how to deal with that well, because
I
a
would
lot
agree
of
with that. I would
yeah,
agree.
because a lot of us have no better relationship with death than our pet parents do. And that's one of the things, that's the my big um foundation of the program that I began, called The Final Journey, empowering pet parents, the end of life journeys for pet parents. So, um, but the idea is to come alongside death, because we're all going to go through it. I mean, don't you think that it would make more sense for us to feel comfortable around it? Don't you think it would make more sense and make it easier if we had a relationship with it that wasn't just fear and denial based? And what does that look like?
Yeah, I don't
And
know.
if we can get there, if we can open up to that, and start to engage with the whole concept of death and what that is. And also, and I'm not necessarily talking about a specific religious belief about it. Okay, you don't have to have a specific religious belief around death. It's still going to happen. you know? And so how we choose to frame it and to, as I like to say, dance with it. Not only just have a relationship with it, but learn to dance with it in a way, and it doesn't make it less devastating. It's still devastating. I bawled all day the first day, when I euthanized my kitty, Cookie. And she, I knew, and I was just waiting for her. And we had this unspoken and yet spoken communication that she would let me know, and she did, when she wasn't happy anymore. And before that, I mean, she ate the night before. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
she threw up, but you
Yeah.
know, it's and yet I know that she's still with me. She is a part of me forever. All of my pets are. And when I choose to remember that alongside the devastation, which, when you walk, I'm walking in the house and I'm thinking, where's Cookie? I got to make sure the door's shut. All these little things that we do, and and now they're not there. And that makes it's sad. And yet we have to dance with all of our emotions, and sadness and grief are part of that. So it's just a matter of having a better relationship with death in general. And there's some, I mean, one of the kitties that my kitty before this, Willie, I sat with him on my bed after I'd euthanized him, and I would just did a meditation because he loved to do meditations with me. And I just had his little body there, and his spirit was still there. And as I was doing this meditation, all of a sudden I had this feeling, this warm feeling that came up from where I was sitting all the way through me and just came through me. And I knew it just felt like such pure love. And I knew that was him. I knew that was the love that we shared that just moved through me. And that whole day, as I worked with other patients and other clients, I was just in this space, and they were saying, my cat's being so good today. What is that? And I just felt him there with me. Because and cats that were really usually very unhappy, not super unhappy, but just, annoyed more or less.
We've got an orange cat. I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah. And so if we leave space open for that, then we have an opportunity to 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 allow that to be a part of our experience, as well as that kind of gut wrenching, oh, they're not here again, right? So it's there if we are open to it. I liken it to the idea of going on a journey, or going, you're required to go for a hike, and someone's going to knock on your door and say, you're going to go for this, 10-day hike, and I'm not going to tell you anything about it or what the terrain's going to be like or anything, but just know that within the next 10 years you're going to go on this 10-day hike. And if you do nothing to prepare for that, you're going to be like freaked out when that knock on the door comes. As opposed to if you have prepared and you have an idea of what, that you can move through this, and that you have the strength, and you have the materials, and you have the supplies, it makes it that much easier. And that's what my program tries to do, is to give people tools so that they can move through this in a way that keeps them grounded, in a way that keeps them have a level of confidence that, yes, it's going to be hard, but I can do this, and I know how to get the support that I need. So
Well, and I've been obviously I'm friends with many vets and have been working with vets for many years, and I don't think that this journey in anticipatory grief falls on the vets. I think it falls on us as pet parents to do the research and understand stuff. But one thing I would like vets to do is, I want people to talk to us when we have a senior pet, not when they're 10, not when they're 12, when they're 7, when they're 8.
or
I've
when they're
talked about that.
puppies or kittens.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
Sophie's 15, and my vets are amazing, and they know what we just went through with Baxter, and how suddenly he was gone, and they've yet to sit down and say, hey, we just went through this with Baxter. Let's talk about Sophie. She's 15. You guys, like, she's lived this amazing life. I want you to start mentally preparing. And I've said this a lot. I talk to people who have 7-year-old dogs, 8-year-old dogs, 10-year-old dogs. And I say, oh, how are you doing a lot of senior blood work? It's expensive, right? And they're like, no, we don't do that. My dog's not a senior. I'm like, you have an 8-year-old German Shepherd. That's a senior. But they don't know that. And people don't know that, which means if they're not prepared even for the, hey, I want to make sure I'm doing enough blood work and making sure you're taking Dasequin or Antinol or whatever, then you're probably not doing what you said and mentally preparing for the end. So let me ask you this, because I want, I think there's probably a lot of veterinarians watching this who are taking notes. And I think there's a lot of pet parents watching this. So if you're a pet parent watching this and this is resonating with you, you heard what Dr. Fernandez just said, like, you need to start working on this. So if you had to give us, and I'm putting you on the spot here, if you had to give us 3 tips to help us with our anticipatory grief, what would those 3 tips be? Just things we can do daily, weekly, monthly, mentally, physically. What can we do as pet parents of senior pets to help us feel better and help us prepare for that 10-mile hike that you talked about?
Yeah. So honestly, it's developing a healthy relationship with death, a healthy relationship with your with suffering, to understand what that is and what that isn't, and how it's a subjective thing. It's not, just because the cortisol level goes from 1 to 5 doesn't mean that someone's suffering. They may have pain, but I think we've all had pain that didn't bother us, that seemed like it should, and maybe we've all had pain that maybe no one else thought it should bother us, but it really does. And so that's the suffering part. And that's a hard one to get to really, dive into, because even for myself, it's like, I have a pretty good relationship with death, but suffering, I don't want to suffer, and what does that look like? And then learning to understand our own inner voice, just trusting that and trusting what that looks like. In addition to that, preparing, and this is what my program does, is it actually helps you and gives you the tools so that you can meet this. Because if we stay in denial about death, then, and I see this every day, people will pick up my book, because I also have a book. They'll look at it and they go, oh,
Yeah, I don't want
and
to
they
read
won't
that.
go there. They
Yeah, because they
can't.
just say, I don't want to think about this.
I
I don't
don't
want to
want to
read
think
that.
about it. And so
Yeah.
long as people stay there, that we're going to continue to have a real challenge, and they're going to continue to have a real challenge, and they're going to try and lean on whoever they can. But it's just going to be, if you don't address it, and if you try to ignore it, because I don't think that, and I think that veterinarians don't like to talk about it. Medical doctors don't like to talk about it, because it's somehow a failure, the idea of death, and we're not, and if we talk about it, then we're going to make it happen. No, it's going to happen. And so it's just a matter of, and it's a matter of being present with it and being able to say yes. And what do I want? So with the older dogs, what do they want? Ask that question of them. My cat, I didn't do blood work on her because she had to be anesthetized in order to do it. She hated it that much. And yet I could cuddle with her and snuggle with her, and she and so we had an agreement. This is what I would do, this is what I wouldn't do.
Yep.
And so,
And lived to 16, by the way.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really, what do you and your pet want? What's a good quality of life for you? And how can you make that happen? And it's different for everyone. And don't necessarily listen to somebody else who says, oh, they're suffering, or, oh, you should, why are you euthanizing them now? They could still live for whatever if you do this,
Yeah.
and this. And you're like, this animal that would never want that. So, listen deeply within yourself, but face it and be present with the reality of what's happening and what is going to happen.
Well, let me ask you this, because I'm asking this. For years I ran a software company that worked with vets, and I saw it from the veterinary side. Now I'm building Love Baxter, and I'm seeing it from the pet parent side. So I'm going to ask the question of, and I'm going to, look, I have a supportive wife upstairs. We have a 15-year-old Boston Terrier, a 7-month-old Boston Terrier named Cosmo, and we have a 9-year-old cat named Nala. So I've got a support system. But let's say, and by the way, there was a time when I lived alone, and these 2 dogs were all I had on Earth. In fact, after a avalanche of life changes, I took my 2 dogs, I moved to Denver, Colorado, and started my life over. And it was the best thing I ever did. But all I had were those dogs. So, if you're telling me at that moment in time when I had just these 2 dogs, the first night we moved to Denver. It's snowing really bad. They could deliver none of my furniture. I'm sitting on the floor of my new apartment in Denver. My dogs are excited, but also like, where are we? What just happened? It was the first time I'd ever not lived in Las Vegas, where I was born and raised. I was in my late 20s, and all I had was these dogs, no furniture. We just all laid on the floor together in like a ball, the 3 of us. How could I possibly sit there and, get my mind to a place where I have a good relationship with death? Or, I think about seniors with pets who have lost someone, and this pet is all they have. Or I think about someone with, a support animal. There's all these, I don't want to say edge cases because they're just normal things, but we have
Yeah.
all these things.
Yeah.
How are we supposed to sit there and say, if, I'm okay if one of these animals passes
You're
away,
not
when they
going to
might
be
be our
okay.
only have? Yeah.
I
How do
mean,
we
you
do
have,
that?
and that's what, and so that you have to be okay with not being okay. And to look at what I talk to people about is, when we're done with this podcast, this interview that we have right now, it's going to die. I mean, it will live on in another
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
But our relationship, what we're doing right now, it's over. Every breath ends. It births and ends. So death is happening all the time. And we have a relationship with each breath. We let it go. We have a relationship with all of the people in our lives. We have a relationship with the seasons of of our lives. And what I mean is like summer, fall. It's summer now. It's not going to be summer in 3 months. And so if we get used to looking at everything as a cycle of birth and death, then it's not quite so foreign, because we know that something else happens after that. And even with Baxter, I think that you could say this is something else that's happened since he's died. Something within you has shifted. Something, your life continues on with his spirit as a part of you. And so that becomes the foundation of what's happening with Sophie. You don't know what's going to happen when she dies, but you know that the love is going to stay there. So the
Yeah.
form is going to change, and now it's going to become formless. So instead of death, you can call it formlessness, non-physical. But it doesn't mean that there isn't love there. There doesn't mean that the energy of that being isn't still there. And I just talk about it as love. I don't talk about it as anything else, religious at all. But the love is still there, and how that moves forward and expresses itself. What you're doing now is an expression of the love and the bond that you have with Baxter and your wife. And so what does that do to what all the angst that you were just feeling about, the death? It just makes more space.
It's
There's
true.
space for both.
And you know what? Like, everything you're saying, it makes a ton of sense for all of us. And I hope if you're out there watching this and you're going through anticipatory grief, and I assume you probably searched for anticipatory grief on YouTube or Facebook or wherever, and you found this video, you're like, okay, these people are speaking to me. Yeah, and there's a lot of days where I don't outwardly feel the anticipatory grief, but obviously it's still, to put it in perspective, over the last 2 years for work, I went on like 40 trips in 2 years, and I have not traveled since November, which was 2 weeks after Baxter passed away, because I don't want to be gone if something happens to Sophie. Now, the joke is she's 15, she's going to live to 18, but my wife and I will not have traveled for 3 years because I was too stressed. I think everything you're saying is just super helpful. And like I said, if you're out there, and you're going through this final journey. I do think, like, someone else on another podcast asked me, like, what's the one piece of advice I would give? Having like researched and built Love Baxter and done all this stuff. And I do think the number one piece of advice I'd give, which I said the other day, was just, you have to accept that this is coming, and like, I've got a 7-month-old puppy upstairs, and, we brought him home because we wanted, we noticed Sophie was sad about 4 months after Baxter was gone. We were like, what, she's still sad. Let's bring a dog home. Well, we can't go bring home a 3 to 5 year old. Sophie is so stubborn and set in her ways. If we bring home a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old, I don't think it'll go well. So we brought home a puppy, and he's definitely brought home some life to her, which is great. And now we're stressed about him. And there's days where he doesn't eat. I'm like, oh God, here we go. But no, I think going through all of this and the more research I've done, I just keeps coming back to what Liz was saying. We have to understand that this is coming. Our parents will one day pass. Grandparents will one day pass. Hopefully it's in a long time. And even though it's hard to think about, I think that's what made Baxter's situation so hard was, there's a photo of him there's an About Baxter page on lovebaxter.com. There's a photo of me holding him at the beach. And we were at a Boston Terrier French Bulldog meetup in Long Beach. He was the craziest dog at the beach that day. I kept having to pick him up because he was like playing too hard. To think that he was gone 6 or 7 weeks later, like, it doesn't compute. So I didn't have the chance because, like, 5 days before he was gone, we were told his blood work's perfect. He's going to be okay. And then he's gone. And we didn't get those moments to kind of accept it. So, Sophie was diagnosed with Cushing's 2 years ago, which we kind of felt like started the clock. And then here we are, and the clock is still going and going and going. And my little tank is still going.
So
It's crazy.
yeah, I totally hear what you're saying about, because even with Cookie, my little kitty that just passed, she got sick in March, and I had just come back from a trip, and she was really not well, and I didn't think her birthday was March 31st, and this was like March 21st, and I didn't think she was going to make it. And so at that point, I said, I'm not going on any more trips either. And but those 4 months, I was watching her every day. How is she doing? Is it good enough? And some days were good, like you said. Some days were not so good. And that's all. That's what we're asked to do. And I walk people through this too. It's like, is today the day? And if you can, and I have a process where you can help to kind of answer that question within your own body. But what you want to do is you have to keep asking the question, because it's going to shift. At some point, it's going to be, yeah, today's the day. And with Sophie, you have much more of an idea. With Baxter, I know he had some underlying issues, but he was still, going, and they were saying everything was fine. And that's lovely. And he was saying, he was telling you, and this is the other thing about dogs, especially, that all pets, I think they're so beautiful about just living life. It's like, today I'm having the greatest day of my life. And you know what, when they do that, it actually, I'm glad that you have that. I'm glad that he was able to give that to you, even though, in retrospect, there's also this devastating part of that. And it's our choice to look at that and choose the story that brings a smile to our face, our heart, that he got this. I'm so glad that we took him there. I'm so glad that he had the best time of his life that day, because that's something that we were able to give to him. And that's something that I get to carry in my heart. Or you could choose to lean into, he was gone in 8 weeks, and that just seems so unfair. And if you stay in that energy and in that story, you become less happy too. Your joy is taken away from you, which is not what he would want. He would be like, I just had a good time, and I'm glad that I did. And so they teach us how to stay in the joy.
I agree. I can't thank you enough for being here today, giving us these tips to work on. So if someone's watching this and they want to reach out or find you online, where can they find you?
Best place is wisdompaws.com, WISDOMPAWS.com.
Awesome.
Wisdompaws.com. Yeah.
Well, and look, if you're out there and you're watching this, check out wisdompaws.com. Go to lovebaxter.com. We have dozens of resources on anticipatory grief and pet loss grief, a directory where you can find awesome people. Dr. Fernandez is there as well. And again, you don't have to do this alone. There's so many people out there helping with this and talking about this and giving tips. We have tons of, like I said, blogs and resources. So, follow along with lovebaxter.com on social media, subscribe to this channel, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you so much, Dr. Fernandez.
Thank you, Adam. What you're doing is just amazing, and I'm really, really grateful for you. So thank you.
Thank you very much.